Nick, shall we go back to the wonderful time, somewhat, I don't know how long ago it was now, when we had normal bookshops and we socialised, and you were coming into bookselling. You have a very interesting story on your road to bookselling. I was hoping you'd impart some of it on our members, because I talked to you about this in, not Albuquerque, where were we? Baltimore. So it's a terrific story. Can you tell us how you came into bookselling, and also that kind of innovative way that you renovated and got your community to actually invest in your bookshop?
Sure. I definitely can, and this is what I was hoping to sort of spend a lot of time in a lot of bars over there talking about.
So was I.
This summer, but to fill in the detail, but I'll try and give a quick flavor. Yeah, so we set up the bookshop. Juliet, my wife, and I set up the bookshop in 2006. I used to be a capital markets lawyer, which sort of being partially responsible for previous crises, but definitely not this pandemic. We had the idea came to us, the romanticized version of the story, but it's entirely true, is that whilst on honeymoon, we were in Seattle for a few days, and we went to the Elliott Bay Book Company, which remains one of the finest independent bookshops in the world. Yeah. And we spent, I did a couple of visits there, and then a few days later, when we'd headed to our end destination on the honeymoon, we were sitting on a terrace and we were talking about, I'd always spent my time wanting to run my own business. We knew we didn't want to be lawyers forever. Been doing it for like 8 years, something like that. And we said, what about having a bookshop like that? What about we didn't really feel that bookshops that were that full on in terms of the dialogue around books, whether that's in the way they display, whether that's in the signage, a lot of stuff that now is much more prevalent than it was then. But right then in the UK, certainly all the chain bookshops, and not as many independents were doing it in that way, were really all about spreading a very personalized love and opinion about books. And we said, well, what if you had a bookshop like that, and that had that very intensely high American level of service, not the fake have a nice day kind of version of American service, but the service that anyone's been over there knows that is actually it's just such a welcoming a dialogue with customers. It's so hands-on. And so we mulled this idea. We went back, we mulled the idea over. We basically began a plan, and we left our home, which was at the time in Prague, which is where I was doing my lawyering, to make it more palatable. And we moved back to the UK, and we chose Bath because we had kind of family connections in this. We just decided this part of the world was the right one, and we looked at smaller towns, but we decided what we wanted to do needed a good captive market. And at the time, there was no independent in Bath, so we opened in Bath in 2006. We had no retail experience, I should say. So all of this is the real abbreviated version, and basically it was built on blind faith. And we built our stock up entirely from scratch. We didn't accept any wholesaler lists or anything. We just kind of built it up from a blank spreadsheet so that it was entirely our own. And Juliet designed a shop that was very light and airy, and it was all done on a shoestring, but it was sort of, a little bit, it's full of weird little spots and quirks now, but back then, right from the start, we set the tone for that by having a clawfoot bath in the middle of the children's section that we kind of converted into a book table and things like that. So it's supposed to be full of personality. And it got accepted by the community, and gradually our kind of reputation for recommending, and because it was just coming from an honest view, I guess, just sort of really, really seemed to strike home. And over time, visitors started to find us as well. It was built definitely by the people of Bath. That's who kept us in business early on. But then gradually, people said nice stuff about us, and things like TripAdvisor and blogs and all of this kind of stuff came around, and more visitors to the city found us as well. And then thank you. And I try. But I mean, this is genuinely how it came about. I mean, really, we just at the beginning, we were just, it has worked tremendously well. I'm not going to deny that. And we've won some lovely awards, and people say nice things. But basically, we were just being a very high service level bookshop. That's the essence of it. That was what we wanted to do. And really, it was all about a personal recommendation of books. And that's the bit that kind of led to the other things that we added into the business. But just to touch on the other part of your question, Robbie, you talked about the community being more involved. You know, this would be in October 2018. We identified a one-off opportunity to expand the shop by taking over the premises next door, which belongs to our landlord. So that was a slight reverse eviction situation, which is a strange one. But basically, we wanted to re-rent the whole place for a longer period of time. We wanted to add that in because we were running out of space behind the scenes as well. Especially we were running a business that was 4 times the size it once was from the same tiny back office. We needed more space. And we really wanted a bigger kids section. So we did that, and we used crowdfunding to do that. Crowdfunding's not been used terribly often in book selling, although I'm sure it'll increase, and I hope people use it if they're really struggling in the aftermath of the pandemic. But we were quite unusual in that we were doing it not from a position of weakness. We were open with our customers in that we said, we can do this, but we'd love to do this without crippling bank financing, and and we'd love you all to play a part. And we had this sense that our customers wanted to be more deeply involved. So we did a crowdfunding scheme that involved lots of very kind of creative rewards, and people really backed it. And a lot of the rewards were things you could gift as Christmas presents. So really, it was a lot for us was about cash flow. It was like, let's get this money in now from our community. They're all getting something back from it. We're not taking from them, and it was overwhelmingly supported. So
can you describe
that expansion opened up in February 2019.
Can you describe some of the things that the people in your community got?
Yeah, so I mean, the basic thing was we have a ceiling with everybody's name on it who subscribes. So that was like the basic thing. The funny thing about that is that was my idea to do it as like a ceiling rather than a wall. That was a really bad idea from the perspective of the person who has to get 940 names on a ceiling.
You're the lawyer.
Yeah, I'm not the. Yeah, it was a great idea from a funding point of view, from the commercial point of view. It wasn't a great idea from the back-breaking exercise of sort of transferring names on that.
It does look amazing, though, doesn't it?
It does look great, but the funny thing about it is that Juliet literally yesterday, before we opened fully for browsing, took the opportunity of removing the very final backing strip off the last kind of panel on that. So it's taken us a year to actually kind of fully erect that. But anyway, the other thing I would say is that, we had all sorts of stuff. We had things like people could say, name the place they were going on holiday next year, and we would choose them 3 books that would be great for that vacation, or of course for someone else. So it was playing into our book selling skills. We had come and be a bookseller for the day. So people were paid us for them to come and work for us for a day. And by the way, that was incredibly popular. I mean, we had sort of finite number of limits. We did a couple of children's parties, children's birthday parties, which is something that'll never be offered again by Mr. B's. I can say that as an exclusive. But it was that people loved it, and the kids involved had a great time. So yeah, all kinds of things like that.
Now, you've been quite innovative in your book selling too. Can you run us through the book spa concept, which I think is something a lot of people will be interested in? And just generally, you have this extreme customer service idea, don't you? Which you touched on already. The book spa is of interest.
Yeah, so I mean, extreme customer service is kind of what I think about it now, sort of after the effect. What it started with was a conversation in the pub about how come, if recommendations were what people really wanted, how could you make that into something that you could gift? So we came up with the concept of a reading spa, which for those who have not yet come across it is basically a voucher that can be purchased, and the recipient can book in a time to come in and sit one-on-one with a bookseller over tea and cake. You have to all be remembering this is pre-pandemic, for the last 10 years pre-pandemic. There are obvious structural issues with the reading spa right now. and they sit and we chat to them for 20-25 minutes about what they like reading, what they don't like reading. We get into the discussions about books. It's not done in a therapeutic way, despite the kind of, we call it bibliotherapy for a laugh, and we call it a reading spa, but it's not really therapeutic. It's a very normal conversation about what they like reading. And then the bookseller involved leaves the customer for 10 minutes to relax, have a browse, and goes away and gathers maybe 15 books, 20 books, something like that, and brings them back up to the customer and then talks them through it, just as you would if you were talking to a customer who wanted a detailed recommendation at your counter. The customer has got, within the price of their reading spa, has a £55 voucher that they can spend on books, and so they choose a number of books from the pile. Of course, they can top up, and many do, with as many books as they want, but there's also no compulsion. I mean, if somebody is coming to this gift and don't have money to spare on extras, essentially they're walking away with 6 paperbacks or something like that, as well as a goodie bag, with a cloth bag and a mug and this kind of thing. So that's the reading spa. Before the pandemic, if people are thinking about introducing things like this, if this is the kind of meat of it that we would have got into if I'd been over there. I'll give you a pro and a con. The pro is, before the pandemic, we were booked up 7 months ahead, 4 appointments a day. Right. So the level of customer interest in this product and the level of loyal customer retention it gives you is incredible. So if you can do anything like this, if you're considering anything like this, it is unbelievable in terms of how far it can go. But the flip side to consider is, once you get it up to that level, if you get it up to that level or anything like that, any similar variation on this, of course that plays into your staffing costs. The way that you think about staffing changes, because your staff need to be able to talk about books in that way, which I insist on anyway. I only employ people who love books and know how to talk about but anyway, it does have, adds a lot of complications to how many people you need on the shop floor, the on and off, however you organize your teams. There is complexity to it, I won't deny. But I think if anyone has any doubt about commoditizing the skill of bookselling in some way, that's one way to do it. I think it's really worth looking at, because we are seeing people, I don't know how it is in Australia, but I feel that in the UK, people think of a bookseller differently to most forms of retail advisor. They do treat us better than in most forms of retail. There is a degree of professionalism and expertise to what we do, and that is something that people are willing to pay for when gifting. And there's lots of different ways to do it.
Nic, you should talk about your subscription as well. Sorry, Robbie.
No, it's just I love talking about the sort of non-transactional nature of bookselling. Most people don't think that they're spending money in a traditional transaction manner. It's an exchange. It's an interesting area, And you have subscriptions as well. I've seen your huge spreadsheets, Nic. They're very impressive.
Yes.
So that creates a lot of work.
Yeah, it does. So our subscriptions, I mean, I think anyone can get into subscriptions, and I don't think it has to be so much work. You can do a shop wide, this is our book of the month, who wants to subscribe and get it every month. There's that kind of model. The model we took was again around recommendation. So we have people fill in a questionnaire about their reading tastes once they've become a subscriber, and then for 3 or 6 months or a year, they're going to receive a book a month that's been handpicked by their individual bookseller who's looking after their reading tastes. And we look at their questionnaire every month, and we choose them a book, and then we wrap it beautifully in normal circumstances, and then we ship it to them. It is, because of the personal recommendation way we're doing it, it is much more intense, and it does, again, use staff time, and you have to weigh that up and maybe think about it in a slightly more, well, if I thought about it in a truly commercial way and sort of attributed time in the way that, say, a wholesaler would, time cost, we'd probably all give up. But the basic thing is, if you really want to grow it, and it can be a very lucrative part of the business, I think that element of bespoke is what has made ours grow so enormously. We have many thousand.
Of the volume.
We have more. So we have more than 3,000 subscribers. at the moment, and it has grown. You know, I'm not sure off the top of my head how many subscribers we've had in total, but we have a pretty good retention rate, and it's growing all the time. And so obviously it began with 0, and it began with, like, you know, early on we had 40. So maybe, let's say, you know, each of the booksellers had to choose 6 books in a month, you know, and it began with personalization elements that we had to drop as it grew. So we had people writing a little bookmark and saying, hey, I think you're going to like this book because it's got, you know, I don't know, giving a one-line reason. Well, that had to go. You know, once we were doing 30 of those, that became untenable. So that's a shame. But the customers kind of joined us on that. They understood that. We still give them nice little additions, and the books look beautiful. And there is a dialogue. So people feed back, and we have a team, you know, who work on keeping in touch with the feedback. And so it is kept very personalized, I think, as much as we can. And of course, now with 3,000 or so, it's a very different logistical plan. The book selling team have to have rotated into their monthly timetable, a dedicated time for sitting down and doing picks. I always do mine between the hours of sort of 7 p.m. and 1 a.m. on a couple of evenings, so that, you know, on a decreasing scale of quality. But but you know, and the regular staff are doing it on days, you know, on days at the shop when we can rotor it in. But so it is complicated. But I tell you, if you choose to go down that route, you don't have to make it as complicated as that. But if you want colossal growth, it's anything that's personalized gives you the bigger growth. But anything that's but the whole area of subscriptions, especially as we've seen in times like these, is a very strong one to look at in terms of being able to reach customers even when your shop floor is inobtainable. Whether that's because people are far away, or whether that's because you've got a pandemic.
How many staff do you have, quickly?
We have 16 full-time staff.
16.
No, sorry, 16 full or nearly full-time. We don't tend to have...
need about 1,600, to be honest.
It's all right. They're good. They're good. And you know, as you said with that spreadsheet, and we're sort of building a better piece of kit actually to streamline that. There are ways that you can make the whole process. And if you've got a team of booksellers who are doing reading spas and reading subscriptions, you better believe they spend all of their time when they're on the shop floor and talking to customers, logging mentally books that will be good for this type of thing. So it's a perpetual staff training mechanism, which I never realized. I don't claim to have had the foresight for that.
Also, Nic, you've been a leader in this. I mean, there are lots of booksellers now in the UK and Ireland who are doing this because Nic's led the way. And Nic's genius was to commoditize the service, and that, I mean, no one had done that before you came along. So no one had done that. Hand selling was a thing that we all did, but you've made it, you put a value on it, and people are more than happy to pay it, and other booksellers are gaining the benefit. Yeah.
Well, thank you. But yeah, I mean, I hope they are. I think it's a good area to get into.
What I thought would happen has happened, of course. We're going to run out of time. So of the 1,000 questions, we got through, 3? So, Meryl, both of you, how do we survive? How do independent bookshops survive in a culture that kind of, I don't know, we lionize, we think scale and volume are important. I think I know the answer, but can you tell us yours?
How do we survive? I think we have to, there's going to be some luck and some skill. I think we're going to have to hope that the pandemic ebbs and that we're able to get back to what we do best, because I think what independents do best is connection. And I think that the swing back from this remote life that we're all living in, this isolated life that we're all living, I think the pendulum swing away from that will be profound. And I think there's a hunger for connection.
Have we learned to use technology better through this? Not that we take it, but...
I think we have. And I think booksellers have learned how to get online. They've learned how to communicate and sell through social media in a way that might not have sat that comfortably with booksellers before. So they've been able to use their voice in other places. And certainly I think in terms of the workplace, we've all learned how to do this sort of thing. So I mean, those are skills, and the way you're delivering your conference, right? I mean, you can deliver author events, and as long as you can continue to monetize them, and as long as publishers and authors help us to do that and are creative about how we deliver those experiential things, then we're just going to have to, reinvent some of the more tangible things that we did into a virtual version.
You did talk a lot about hybridization at the start. So What do you mean? I mean, I've got this grand dream that we can have inventory of all our great independent booksellers somehow visible online, somehow linked. And I haven't got a solution for this, but I think that would be a magnificent project.
It would, because what we really want to be able to do more than anything as a sector is to prove repeatedly, continuously, that we are equal to Amazon, that we're better than Amazon, right? So we want to be able to say, here's a solution for consumers that don't want to shop on Amazon. Here are ways that you can experience bookshops bring you in your community, in your high street, in the shop, in the conversation, but they can also do that online. So I think that hybridization is partly about the confidence to speak in different places and speak in different locations, and reinvent what it is that we do. I'm sure Nic will have lots of much more.
Yeah, so long as we don't think we compete with Amazon, because that's just a turnover price machine. It is different.
It is entirely different, and I think we've got to play to our strengths again. And I think that's one of the challenges, is how we make sure that we get back to the things that make us strong and make us unique, and all that curatorial stuff, the quirky, personality-driven stuff that Nic has done instinctively. Be able to do that in every place we are. We need to go where the people are, right? We need to be where the book lovers are. We need to ensure that they understand what it is we've got to offer, and then make them buy their books from us. Nic, do you want to?
Yeah, it's about it's about nailing our flags entirely to the mast. We will survive and thrive as a concept, the high street bookshop, for so long as we are being relentlessly and openly geeky about our love for our product. You know, we are able to sell our product with, you know, in a sort of way of we should never be afraid of selling it, of actually, you know, of being like salespeople, because you feel exactly the opposite. Yeah, and you should never be afraid of that. And I think that a lot of booksellers really need to feel empowered by that, so that, you know, it's the opposite feeling to be sold a book, or even it's not just books. It could be like an album or something, you know, in a record store. Or it could be any number of things, but it's just, if you got sold it because somebody is absolutely passionate about it and absolutely believes in it, it's the opposite feeling to the sort of car salesman thing. And sometimes we rail against it because salesmanship is seen as a bad thing in other sectors, but in ours, it's really not. And when you do that, it's just letting the passion for the product come through. And we have seen in the last 8-10 years a real rise in the expert, in the geek. You know, you could see it in crocheting, you can see it in coffee, you can see it in all kinds of worlds. You know, those are the businesses that are seen as having a value above and beyond, and where people, I am absolutely convinced, are going to, in fact, after this pandemic, is played out much more. They're going to want to go back and back and back and have those connections with those people. And then, how do we survive? You know, the hybridization thing is, so how do we then try and reflect that in our online presence? And it's that's partly about upping. We never should try and compete with Amazon, because who wants to work that model? But we need to understand the efficiency of that model from a service delivery. So we need to treat our online customers with the same level of customer service that we give our physical ones. That's clear. And I think people are going to learn that really well. So in terms of just the efficiency, but also with the same personality. And it's working out how you do that in a way that's also a pleasant, navigable, efficient online experience. So that's how you kind of hybridize, I think. And then once you're doing all that and you're singing all that, and you got to just, the other side we've got to do is make sure that the rest of our trade structure knows about that, and so doesn't keep knocking the playing field out of kilter in favor of Amazon, and appreciates us for what we're doing.
Yeah, it's been interesting. A lot of members I've talked to have had to move to selling books online, shipping them out through the postal service or delivering them, have found that though that's nice, that's not what we do. And that's just a numbers game, and it's a slightly different sort of selling.
Yeah.
also
We really do
incredibly
need to get those
labour-intensive.
connections back. Yeah,
It-
I can't wait to go back into a bookshop. This is driving me nuts.
You know, and it is a different way of selling, but do you know what? So on our website, we put a thing called the recommendation station, where people can do three things. They can tell us the last book they enjoyed. They can tell us last three books they enjoyed. They can tell us what they're in the mood for. And I can't remember what their other question is. And then what happens is, and it says on it, you're not going to get an answer immediately, because this is going to go to a human bookseller who's going to send you a page on our website made up of 4 books we think you might like. And so and then they can purchase those books, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever they want. And the thing about that is, it's just a little go at trying to bring into the online a little of what we do in the shop. So again, it's a little labor intensive, but those people keep coming back. I mean, obviously through the pandemic, that's been a lot more popular than it was. Yeah. But now then, once you start building people, and even I would just say one last thing, which was when it comes to sending out those books to customers, of course, it's tedious and it doesn't feel as nice. But I mean, I think of my friend Janet Gaddis, who runs Avid Bookshop in Georgia, and I've seen pictures of her when she puts so much joy into every time she sends out a book. She puts little stickers all over the parcel. She draws it. However busy they are, all her booksellers are drawing a little doodle of saying thank you or whatever. They make some joy in that, and they build connections. So I guess it's possible. I guess we're just at the beginning of learning about that side of things. But.
Yes, very true. Yeah.